Well, hello and welcome back to our real estate agent tax cut library. Now, we're still discussing expenses on Schedule C, which is really what the whole library is all about, is helping you minimize your taxes on Schedule C. In this lesson, which you may notice is relatively new because we did have some updated tax laws to incorporate. So this is actually a revised lesson, just to keep you up to date with the latest changes. We're going to be discussing local business meals. Now, this is actually a very confusing and misunderstood section of the tax code. Few realtors keep accurate records in order to get the deductions that they need and the deductions that they're entitled to. And it is also like what we would call a red flag if they're substantial. But what we want to do is help you know which meals are deductible, maximize those meals, because you know beforehand you can plan ahead to minimize your taxes, of course, and maximize your deductions. It's very, like I said, a red flag. And during an audit, if you do get audited, and these things are, if your local meals, your meals are relatively high, they're going to ask you for proof that you were able to deduct those meals. There's a high denial rate when reviewed, mainly because of all the confusion and misunderstanding. They are often just kicked out of there because the IRS will not allow you to deduct them because you either deducted meals that you weren't entitled to, or you don't have the substantiation to prove that you were entitled to those meals. But there is a but there, and this is great. With proper substantiation, if you can prove these deductions, it's a very valuable deduction. And if you, like I said, if you plan ahead, it's going to save you some taxes. Now, what we want you to do is we want you to learn to be confident in taking that deduction. That's the purpose of this course. This lesson in particular, because there are so many mistakes made, we want to teach you how to be confident in your deductions, how to plan ahead, how to make sure you can prove that your deductions are deductible. All right, so let's do a little overview here of the local business meals. Meals are limited to 50% of your total expenses, so whatever your total expenses are, you get to take 50% of those. Now, these are a little bit different than travel meals. If you take the travel courses, those meals are quite different. You're still 50%, but you also have a per diem you can take. Go back to the travel section and check that out, or go to the travel section, check that up if you have questions about that. Key thing here, key point. If you're eating alone, I don't care where you're at, that meal is not deductible for local travel. For local meals, I should say. Local meals. If you're traveling away from your tax home, those could be deductible. However, for a local meal, they are not deducted if you're eating alone. And simply having a meal with colleagues also is generally not a business meal. Just eating in general, hey, you want to go out to eat? I'll meet you so-and-so, discussing some general business. That's not a deductible local meal. So what is a deductible local meal? Well, there are two types of deductible meals. These are either meals directly related to your active trade or business, to the active conduct of business. So we'll get into that a little bit deeper, what that means. And also there are meals that are associated with the active conduct of business. Now, directly related meals, let's dig into that. These meals must pass all three tests. And then we'll dig into these a little bit deeper. We're digging into this tax law here. Number one, the primary purpose of the meal is to conduct business with others. Number two, you actually conduct that business. And number three, you expect some tangible business benefit from that meeting that occurred with that meal. Now let's go into each one of these. What is the primary purpose of a business meal? How do you know when the primary purpose of the meal is business? It's a meal physically with others. Technology does not make a difference. If you're having a Zoom meeting and you're eating during a Zoom meeting with a client, that doesn't count. I know COVID has changed a lot of the way we do business. However, that does not count if you're in a Zoom meeting and you're alone on the other end of that Zoom meeting and you're eating at a restaurant or at your house. That is not a business meal. Sorry. It's a real business meeting where you actually eat. So it's really primarily a business meeting, but you happen to eat during that meeting. Here's a little hint for you. If a deductible business meal, if you have it on your calendar and you have at least an informal agenda saying, let's meet so-and-so, we need to discuss this particular listing, we need to discuss this, let's do it over lunch. That's a business meal. Particular purpose, you're there for a business purpose. You are there to further your business, meaning that you are there because you intend to somehow, directly or indirectly, make money related to that meal. chatting about business conditions, meeting with a colleague and chatting about business conditions, what's the market like, what's going on with different people's listings, what's coming to the market, just for general purposes, that is not a primary business meal. Gossip is not a business meal. It has to be an informal agenda, and business meetings are usually prepared for in advance. So a business meal, which is really a meeting, you're going to have some type of prep time into that, preparing for that meeting. Whether it be formal or informal, but it's really about the meeting, not necessarily the eating, I should say. Here's a couple examples. You're meeting with an owner of a current or prospective listing. You're meeting with a mortgage broker with the hopes of getting referrals. You're intent on getting referrals by meeting with that broker, or you want to get maybe the opposite way around. Maybe you want to find a broker to give business to, and that in turn they will reciprocate and give referrals to you. But that could be a business meal. Meals with a listing agent to negotiate the price for a client. You're there for a business purpose. It may be easy to show you what are not examples, and these are so common. Everybody thinks they're deductible, or many realtors and business people in particular think they're deductible, but they're not. Meals following agents where listings are casually discussed. So you have a meeting with a fellow agent and you just talk about, like I said a minute ago, listings, things like that. That is not a deductible meal. You have a meal with a friend where you just happen to get a referral from that friend. That is not a business meal. Not on the calendar. You don't really have a quote-unquote agenda for that meal. And it really it boils down to common sense. General conversations are not conducting business. I don't care who tells you that. It's not conducting business. So stay out of trouble. Let's get you can plan these things ahead. Okay, the conduct of business. Remember, number one, primary purpose. Number two, you must actually conduct that business. You don't have to be successful. You don't have to get what you want out of the meal, but you must actually fulfill the agenda for which you were there. The purpose for which you were there. You must actually make an attempt. You must fulfill that business purpose. If the primary purpose was negotiate a price, but the property is taken off the market before you can have the meal, that's not a business meal. The purpose no longer exists. You're not actually able to conduct that business. So that is not a deductible business meal. All right, number three, you must expect a tangible benefit, a measurable benefit, I should say, from that meal. Tangible, measurable. There's a result that you can measure and show to others. It doesn't have to be specific. Well, I'm sorry, it's not a general benefit, it's specific. It doesn't have to be tied down to numbers, but you must be able to show the Internal Revenue Service that there was a benefit that you can explain and you can prove the benefit that you expected to get out of that meal. It must be related to your current business, the business you're in now. It can't be when you're like say you're a real estate agent, you're investigating being a broker, and you're going to discuss that at the meal. That's really not related to your current business, just for example. So it must be about your current business. You can't slide a side business in there. Here's an example. You want to get a listing, you want to close a sale, you want to obtain a leads. A good way to do that is to follow up on that meeting and follow up on that lead. If you have a meal with somebody, with the perspective of getting business from them or getting referrals from them, follow up, send an email, do whatever. We'll discuss that later in the section we talk about proving your business meals. Maybe you want to negotiate a contract, you want to interview contractors. So those are the primary, but directly related to your business. What about associated business meals? These are meals related to conducting business. These occur directly before or after a business meeting, or as the Internal Revenue Service may say, a meeting where there's a substantial business discussion. So it could occur directly before or directly after. They're still deductible. The meeting meets the criteria of a business meal without eating. So that means the meeting that you're having really would be a business meal if you didn't have food. However, you can have food with the same individuals after you have that meeting. So I hope that makes sense. Let's say, for example here, let's say you take a client out to dinner after closing on a new home. That's an associated business meal. That could be deductible as a business meal. So there you go. There's your business meal section, your local business meals. At least that's part one. We're going to have more in part two.